Hello crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com, and today I'm here to share a card featuring the AmazaPens twin tip coloring markers. Recently I showed you the AmazaPens sketch fine liners, which were a water-based marker, and these are a slightly different version of the same sort of ink. They have a broad tip and a fine tip on these twin tip markers. So you see here I'm going to write with the broad and then the fine tip. And just like the sketch fine liners, they come in 24 colors in a single pack, but as you can see, they have the two tips. The fine tip is fine enough that you could write in it with a planner, as you see there what it looks like, but I'm going to even compare it to the sketch fine liner, which is in that very light pink color, and as you can see would give you a very, very small line. And because these have a chisel tip and a sort of bullet nib or fine tip, you will be able to use them in a slightly different way. However, they have the same properties in terms of being water-based and working well for watercoloring and for some other techniques that are generally used with water-based markers. One thing that I knew that these markers would be able to do is stamp, because being water-based, they are kind of similar to something like a distress ink pad. And so you could use the color that's coming out of the marker the same way you would use the color that comes out of a stamp pad. And that opens up your options for stamping, because now you can really control where the color is being put on your stamp. And today I'm just going to use a background stamp to get just a broad stroke of color. However, you could adapt this technique easily and do all of your coloring right onto your stamp and then stamp it down, and even sometimes get multiple impressions, because often when you press it down one time there's still a little bit of ink left on there, and you can sort of rehydrate it with a little spritz of water or like a huff of breath and get even a second stamping out of it and really control where it's coming. As mentioned before, they are water-based and so therefore do work for watercoloring, which is what I'm doing here, where I'm just taking two colors of purple, spritzing it with some water, and blending them out. And I'm going to use this blended color later on to do some die cutting. As you see there, I was able to die cut the word mom out of a watercolored piece using the markers. They do, however, blend without water as well, which I'll show a little bit later in the video. To get started here, I just wanted to show you how you can apply color to a stamp. And even though I'm going to be going through a couple different colors here, it will stay wet throughout this time. Like mentioned before though, if you're concerned that they might have dried a little bit and might not be as juicy and ready for stamping, you could just bring the stamp to your mouth and like use a breath of air and just sort of puff on it, and then it will sort of rehydrate it, or spritz it with water. But if you spritz with too much water, then it's going to saturate your paper, so you really are looking for a much finer sort of mist. But I didn't have any trouble. Even though I'm coloring a very large area here and it is taking some time, it didn't affect the stamping at all. The first color wasn't dry by the time I got to the last color. As mentioned, it does come with 24 colors, so there's a pretty wide range of colors here, and some of them coordinate really nicely, so I think that you'll be able to find the colors you need for a variety of purposes. One thing that I think would be fun with these is if you had a sentiment stamp and you wanted each word in the sentiment to be a different color, you could really easily achieve that effect, or even have each letter in the word a different color if it was only a one-word sentiment. Kind of even have them like fade into each other. I know that right now it's really popular to have those long scripty sentiments, and you could really get a fun color blend on those the way I got it here on this background stamp. Now I went for a more sketchy look. I didn't completely cover the background stamp because I did want some of that white edge showing through as well. But here I'm going to show you how you can blend the markers just on regular paper, even without water. I just have some 110-pound cardstock here. Nothing too thick, but just enough that it can take a little bit more marker. If you do this on copy paper, it's not going to be able to take as much color. So I would recommend working with a cardstock to do the blending, or a high-quality coloring book. I think that your results will be better than if you use something with really thin paper. And so you see here that there's basically the light color, the dark color, and that sort of in-between color. And right now you can see the very clear line where those overlap, but as you add some more color, it kind of starts fading into each other a little bit more. And I also found that it was important to give it some time to dry because it doesn't look quite the same wet as when it's fully soaked into the paper and dries off a bit. So I was able to cut this heart border from the watercolor paper where I blended it with watercolor, and you know, it definitely does blend better if you blend with water, but then I used the Smile die cut, the pink one, without water, and either way you can get a pretty good blended effect. I've used a lot of this black for the border and the black for the sentiment strip here just to sort of coordinate with those bold colors. They are going to pop really well off of white or black, and since I had a white background, this black's going to make everything pop even more and make those that smile really come off the paper. And I'll turn it around and just trim off that little bit extra that I had there, and that's going to be pretty much it for a card, just to give you kind of a quick look at how these markers work. I'm sure that I will use them many more times, as I do like the ability to really kind of get a specific custom effect with my stamping and being able to use these in place of inks, because it's so hard to get an ink pad in just one spot of a stamp, but you can definitely do it here with the markers. I also wanted to show how these markers work in coloring books, because I think that's what a lot of people are looking to do purchasing a set of markers right now, is use them in their coloring books. And the coloring books I have are from Color It, and they are a higher quality coloring book. They're an artist quality. They're printed only on one side, and it's a nice thick paper. So I think that they are probably taking color better than some other coloring books may. But what I did find was that these worked well because they have the fine tip for the smaller areas, but they also have that chisel tip on the other end that allows them to cover some of the larger areas in your coloring book. And also here in this coloring book, I took 2 different colors of purple, and I wanted to see how they would blend on this paper. And just like I did earlier with the pinks for the Smile die cut, I found that I was able to blend them by adding a few layers of color over each other. So I pulled the lighter color into the dark color, and then the darker color back into the lighter color, and was able to achieve a little bit of blending even without adding any water. Although these coloring books even can take a little bit of water if that is something that you wanted to try. And so that's just a quick look at the AmazaPens. Again, this video is sponsored by AmazaPens. If you're interested in purchasing them, there is a link in the video description as well as a coupon code for some savings. You can follow me on social media from the links in the video description below, and subscribe to my channel for weekly card making tutorials. Thanks for watching. Bye.